Hello, welcome to my digital summit session titled Distance Banking, Digital, Streamlined, and Future-Proofed. I'll get into all the details of what that looks like shortly, but first I want to quickly introduce myself and Coconut Software. My name is Nathan Pellet, and I'm the Director of Product at Coconut Software. I've been working in software for nearly 20 years now, and I started my career as a software engineer, then found my way into product leadership. The common thread between all the work that I've done, though, is that it's all been at innovative SaaS startups, and all the things I've built have been in service of creating great experiences for people, not users, but real human beings. At Coconut Software, we're modernizing how banks and credit unions engage with their clients and members. The rest of this talk will be about creating and delivering streamlined experiences for both your staff and your customers. Some of you may have seen this before, but I had to include it. Working with financial institutions, I've seen how complex it can be for banks and credit unions to change. In the past, I think there was significant risk aversion to quickly transforming, and with very good reason. However, in talking with our clients and being in this industry, I've seen pretty much overnight that banks and credit unions can change exceptionally quickly. Digital transformation is not new to anyone on this call. We've all been including this as a key strategic pillar for years. But the sense of urgency is what has been dialed up, and it's because of COVID. COVID is helping us to realize that the assumed requirement for face-to-face engagements in banking is actually faulty. Much of what your members and clients can do in person, they can do digitally. So, with the sudden catalyst to move client engagements to digital due to social distancing, financial institutions really need to consider how their member or client demographics are going to affect how well those digital transformations fare. Millennials are a consistently discussed cohort, and with good reason. They are set to inherit a massive amount of wealth from their baby boomer parents, and they're digital natives, growing up with technology and always defaulting to the notion of course, they'll be able to do whatever they want, be it grocery delivery, consumption of movies, or opening up a new bank account in a primarily digital way. And so that brings us to the notion of distance banking and how it needs to be digital, streamlined, and future-proofed in order to capture the attention and resources of these demographics, not just millennials, but everyone. That brings me to the agenda for this talk. First, we're going to talk about what that digital engagement and streamlined in-branch experience actually looks like. Second, we're going to take a look at how we're going to measure the effectiveness of these new channels. And finally, we're going to take a look into what the future of this might look like. And then finally, we're going to open it up for some Q&A. Okay, let's dive into the details here. So, digital engagement equals a streamlined in-branch experience. These things kind of seem contradictory, but I'm going to explain how they're related. In my next slide here, I've cherry-picked a handful of interesting discoveries from a study that PwC did last year about digital transformations and companies that are going really digital. I'm not going to speak about these things too much, and the study itself is really interesting. I recommend following this link later and digging into it. But what I do want to talk about is sort of the underlying theme behind the whole thing, which is that being a digital company these days is table stakes. However, very few companies are really winning at digital. And winning at digital is all about embracing it fully and being a digital first company, but then not forgetting that successful digital experiences only exist in service of people. This is a great chart that we borrowed from the Financial Brands Digital Banking Report for 2020. The most interesting insights to me are that so few banks and credit unions are anticipating the digital transformation of their customer care, personalized marketing, and virtual or video engagement with staff. Granted, this survey was done pre-COVID, but it really speaks to the fact that moving clients and members out of the physical branches and onto things like mobile apps, authenticated portals, and even personalized email communications wasn't really a priority before. But I think we would argue that these have become a priority. The 2019 Accenture Global Financial Services Consumer Study found that half of respondents expressed an appetite for a true omni-channel banking experience that would allow them to switch seamlessly between physical and digital channels. So how can you start ramping up your digital transformation to address this appetite? And I should emphasize too, this data is previous to COVID hitting, so I suspect that the percentage has grown even more than this. Okay, so that's a lot of data about what's happening, but how do we actually execute on this? Well, what it really boils down to is being able to effectively triage your client and member questions prior to them actually coming into your branch. By managing traffic, both by providing excellent communication through email campaigns, your website, mobile app, or even posters on the door of your branch, you can enable your staff to address the key services that truly must be done in branch, such as accessing a safety deposit box or gathering wet signatures for investments. You should divert from your physical channels. Focus on your current customers. You want them to remember how you reacted to this pandemic. Don't lose that personalized touch that you compete with. Social distancing recommends reducing in-branch visits to the bare minimum. To continue serving your clients' needs, offer phone appointments instead. Review your customer journey and look for low-hanging opportunities. You should improve your consumer education. Go beyond landing pages and emails. Send out emails or even phone calls for targeted client concern services or to those who have recently come to the branch to perform a transaction that can be done online. Your digital native / literate members are an asset. Not everyone wants to come to the branch, and that way is more true than ever. You should monitor and adapt. Ask how you can make this time better, communicate better, and establish better services. Your idle branch staff can take some of the load off the call center. Keep an eye on member and staff behavior and be prepared to pivot when needed. The last component is to take stock of your tech stack and how you are using it to help automate some of these components. Do you have a way for members to quickly book appointments with your staff based on location, services, even language spoken? Do you have the ability to support phone and video meetings? If you do have someone walk into the branch for an essential service, how can you keep them safe and socially distanced while they wait? Do you have callback features if clients don't want to wait on hold for your call center staff? If you don't, this process will be that much more manual and thus more painful. Okay, next step. Establishing these digital channels is key, but measuring the effectiveness of them is essential to having an effective digital strategy. Recall that PwC study that we talked about earlier. They emphasize that the leaders in digital are those that not only have the digital strategy, but measure its effectiveness and iterate and improve. One of the key benefits in moving from in-person and in-branch interactions to digital is it is much, much easier to track the engagement and efficacy of your channels. When I say channels, I mean the routes by which your clients, members, or prospects can contact your organization. They range from a mobile app to a contact us form on a web page to a bus stop advertisement to the physical branch itself. Now that all organizations are looking at their expenses with a microscope, it becomes much more important to track how your investments into these various channels is improving engagement, experience, and ultimately profit. The first step to measuring your channel effectiveness is to do a client or member engagement path audit. Essentially, map out each and every way in which an individual might engage with your team, then determine how you're using those paths and tracking those paths to create a funnel for engagements. The good news here is we've developed a handy tool to help with this, and we'll share the link to that with you later. Now, let's look at a concrete example. So you have a mobile app, but have you provided your members or clients with an easy way of searching for a wealth management service and the ability to book an appointment with a financial advisor for more info? If not, you're missing out on capturing that interest and potentially helping your advisors land a new client. Next is to measure your staff performance. How many of your appointment-taking staff have a full schedule? Who is being underutilized and perhaps could help out on the phones or video conferencing with clients who've requested a callback? Do you have the right coverage to meet walk-in needs? Which staff are driving the most revenue-generating meetings? All these are opportunities to smooth labor costs and make sure that all staff are being productive. By pulling data from the engagement within your various channels, your marketing team can also determine which campaigns and channels are driving the best results and where you should pivot. Using things like appointment booking CTAs and email campaigns can provide your marketers with data about customer behavior. For example, by including a book a meeting button on your lending solutions page, you might find a faster engagement versus a traditional contact us form. Including a booking shortcut that leads to a callback request form in an email campaign may drive better click-throughs than asking a member to dial a 1-800 number. All this data taken together and fueled by technology can help you laser focus on the activities and paths that are actually driving customer experience and profits, helping you get to a healthy ROI on these investments. Here's an example of a few of the metrics we've seen at one of our clients, who happens to be one of the largest US tax preparation firms. What this is really saying is using technology and relying on those digital channels has helped them increase the number of appointments booked by 41%, helped more of those meetings actually occur, a 13% decrease in no-shows or uncompleted, and helped drive a 3 times higher conversion rate for those clients that did book an appointment. The stat that blew me away, and this is prior to COVID, was that 55% of their new clients actually start their journey online versus in branch. The safe assumption is that that percentage will continue to climb for the foreseeable future. So we've discussed the transition from a reliance on face-to-face to digital, as well as underscored the importance of tracking the effectiveness of your channels. The last part is doing some of that blue sky thinking and sharing what we've heard from our clients, prospects, and the market about where the future of branches will go. Today, you have the opportunity to enhance your service offerings and customer engagement paths not only for the next few weeks, but as we look towards the long term. Chatting with other industry leaders and executives of banks and credit unions, I found that the ones that already had an appetite to change and leverage technology are in a better position to react to drastic changes in customer behavior and have experienced less disruption over the last few months. Look to see how you can repurpose underused staff and triage client and member queries to less expensive and quicker resolution paths. As we look towards the fall, I think we'll see a retooling of the way banks and credit unions are communicating with their members and clients. Shortcuts to book appointments with your staff that can help answer questions, streamline the branch experience through queue and lobby management, and the widespread use of phone, video, and callback services. Mobile check-in for appointments will become the norm, and folks will be used to waiting in their cars for a text message or mobile app notification to approach the branch to start their meeting. Banks and credit unions should be considering the actual layout of their branches, how to increase space between waiting areas, how will advisor offices operate, and how to manage specialized staff who operate out of several branches. And then, thinking into the new year and beyond, many of the folks I've talked with have already started implementing their transformation strategies to move from traditional branches to hub-based advice centers, where specialists, mortgage brokers, wealth management, retirement specialists, CFAs will be able to meet with clients and members quickly. Perhaps workspaces will open up to help small and medium-sized businesses leverage bank technology to help with their problems. Wealth management is going to see a huge change in their roles. Clients and members will insist on meeting with your advisors at locations that are convenient to them, not just at your branches. And finally, the transformation of how banks and credit unions will become even more urgent. Electronic signing of documents, preparing and sharing data ahead of meetings to speed up the discussions, how financial institutions can break down their internal silos to share data on their clients and members more effectively, leading to personalized communications and contextually appropriate cross-sell opportunities. If you and your management team can start looking towards the future and anticipating what your base of clients and members are going to be expecting as the new normal, you can then make the right decisions from a digital, streamlined, and future-proofed state of mind. Digital transformation doesn't have to be scary for your staff or your clients and members, but it is inevitable and it is speeding up. So use technology to shift folks online or in-app or over the phone and keep the in-branch experience for those who absolutely must do those activities face-to-face. Measuring the effectiveness of your channels means you can see the bottlenecks and problem areas and double down on the investment into the engagement activities that are working. And finally, consider where the future of your branches are going. We think they'll start to look like centralized advice hubs with easy access to specialized advisors and services. And we think that clients and members will want to get a similar level of experience regardless of whether it's in person or digitally. If you go the extra mile in providing really great, helpful service at this incredibly stressful time, then I believe it will have a lasting impact on how your clients or members feel about your organization.
All right, so for the Q&A here, I'm going to actually require the assistance of my colleague, Suchet here. He's going to man all of the questions and pull them in and send them my way, and I'll do my best to answer them. So I'd like to introduce Suchet. Suchet, can you say hello and fire away on the first question?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Nathan. So I'm pretty excited to dig into some of these questions, so I'm gonna shoot straight away. So the first question I'm seeing here is, as we begin to tie digital experiences into the lobby, what solutions should banks implement right now? And what should be considered more of a long-term strategy?
That's a good question. So I think right now, the absolute bare minimum when you talk about your lobbies is to make sure that you've got sort of a no-touch queuing solution. So I know there've been things like self-serve kiosks in lobbies before to get in line. I think you need to be mindful of individuals using touch screens. So if you're able to drive them to a mobile phone, or even better yet, if you've got someone who can direct them towards what the queuing situation looks like, and I think that's the sort of table stakes right now. At minimum, I think it's probably putting markers on the floor to say, hey, you know, this is all the places where you can stand so that you keep a reasonable distance from all of the other people who are waiting in line. I think when we look ahead to the future, what the long-term solution looks like, it's about providing as many channels as possible, because I think the future of banking is all about individual choice. It's about providing the channel that is most convenient for each one of your individual consumers. And I think that you'll find that some gravitate towards doing everything digitally. Some might prefer doing everything in person, face-to-face. And I think that we're increasingly going to see that people really want sort of a hybrid model where I can help myself to a great extent digitally, but then to go that last mile, so to speak, I can get a high touch sort of advisory layer on top of that. And so what I'm talking about here is what I'd consider to be sophisticated digital journeys. So it's where you might start on a website, you might start in the digital banking app, you might start with a call to your call center, and where you have the tools in place to usher them towards an appointment booking, or maybe the ability to queue up to meet someone in branch and do so digitally from that website or digital banking app, or maybe even from the call center where they say, yeah, we've got your place reserved, you know, your turn should be up in 15 minutes, and, you know, just give them your phone number when you get to the branch, and they'll, you know, sort of tell you about your position in line. That's going to require a bunch of Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just gonna ask you. So I know you mentioned some tools about introducing a sophisticated digital journey. I was wondering if you had any, I'd say in mind that right off the top of your head that banks can sort of introduce in the long term.
Okay, well, so obviously I'm from Coconut Software, so my preference would be to leverage our solution. And so within Coconut solution, we have appointment booking that you can embed in your website or your digital banking app or through your social media channels. And we also have queuing solutions that, again, you can leverage through a variety of channels. So I have a personal bias towards those, but there are other flavors out there so that you can do those sorts of things. But I think the trick here is that it's not solved with just appointment booking on your website, but it's about being at the right place at the right time for your customer base. And so I think you should really leverage on your institutional knowledge of how are your consumers engaging with you, and then making sure that you've got the right options for them available there to connect them to that in-branch experience, like via appointment scheduling or an on-demand queuing solution.
So do you think that the traditional branch as we sort of know it today will ever come back to life, or will we be seeing a lot of banks try to introduce sort of a hybrid solution like you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I think that the signs were already pretty clear that the hybrid was the model for the future, well before COVID was a thing. I think that what we're seeing now is just an acceleration towards that hybrid model. I think maybe in some places we may go back to sort of the traditional branch as we've known it. But I think that's going to be the exception and not the norm. I think increasingly the way that people are going to look at their banks is they're going to expect that most of the service offering can be done digitally. And then the part that they actually need to do face-to-face is the stuff that actually must truly essentially be done face-to-face, like safety deposit boxes and actually having thoughtful, in-depth conversations with trusted advisors. And even in that case, I see the appetite moving towards more and more digital in the future.
So what advice would you have for, let's say there's a bank that's sort of new to the digital transformation and now they're being introduced to this whole concept of distance banking. What would you suggest when it comes in the form of metrics to sort of measure their performance and where they can pinpoint sort of pain points in the customer journey that they can target and improve on?
That is a great question. And I think the single most important metric to start with is to actually ask your customers how satisfied they are with the experience. Start there. If you're going to do anything, just ask your customers, were you satisfied with the experience that you got today? And if you get an overwhelming, yes, this was fantastic, I got all of the things that I was looking for, then you're really on the right track. And then you can start diving into deeper metrics and starting to figure out like each individual step along the way, where's fall off happening and all of those sorts of things. But start by just talking to your customers and surveying them and saying, was this journey a satisfying experience? And was it not? So the customer satisfaction measurement is the number one place to start. And then after that, it is really about measuring the effectiveness of each and every channel. And what I've seen from watching digital engagements is that the effectiveness of one channel probably shouldn't be pitted against the effectiveness of another. What you should really look to do is make sure that that singular journey is really seamless, where you're looking for drop-off points and points of friction. But just because your online queuing solution has a higher volume than maybe your folks who are requesting a callback through a callback service doesn't mean that the callback service is not being effective. It just means that there's a different type of individual who is trying to leverage that kind of thing. So I think you need to be a little bit cautious about pitting these things against each other, but most importantly, ask your customers, were you satisfied with this experience? And if they say no, then you can dig deeper and say, well, okay, tell me why. What was it about it? And that'll give you your best insights in terms of where to improve.
That's interesting. So I think we have time for just about one more question. And I've got it here. So we have our branch people operate like a contact center. Trying to run a context with branch behaviors and processes introduces inefficiencies. So what do you think about that, Nathan?
One, I'm not surprised to hear this question because I've heard this from a number of the financial institutions that we work with, that basically, since your branch staff are now working remotely or working from home, it is sort of intuitive to have them behave like contact center staff now to field customer inquiries. I think that the essence of this idea is correct, but the actual execution is somewhat flawed. So I would suggest that you don't do that. So I think that having your former branch staff sort of behave more like call center staff and that they're working with your customer base in a remote fashion is a good idea. However, I think we would all recognize that the expertise of the call center staff is different from the expertise of the branch staff, and you should leverage that. And so my recommendation is to be thoughtful about how you're funneling your customer base to those two very different groups. So call center is more about efficiency of getting to that resolution. And more often than not, it's sort of an emergency type service. It's not quite the right language, but it's more reactive to, I have a problem and I need you to fix it right now. Whereas your branch staff tends to be more advisory. It's more long-term. It's looking into the future. It's being a little bit more thoughtful about that engagement. And it's looking for opportunities to cross-sell and things like that. And yes, I recognize that there is some overlap, and some institutions may say, hey, you know what, our staff actually are easily cross-trained in both. And if that's the case, then that's fine. But I think for most institutions, you should treat them differently. And so the trick here is trying to get your customer base to go to the right individual. And so I think that totally comes down to having really great messaging on your website, in your mobile banking app, wherever your customers are looking up information about your institution and how to contact you, and giving them really clear calls to action of if you're doing this, call this number and route that to your branch staff. If you're doing this, call this number and have that routed to your call center staff. And again, this is where you can really effectively leverage something like Coconut software to route all of your sort of advisory services to your branch staff on an appointment or on-demand basis, and where you might just keep your normal call center route for your call center staff. Okay, so I think that is all we've got time for today. I want to thank Suchette for being my lovely assistant, and thank everyone on the webinar for attending. And once again, if you have any more questions about what I talked about today, I'd love for you to hit the URL on the screen here and head to our website. And our team would love to assist you in answering any more questions you've got about how to effectively execute on distance banking at your organization. Thank you.